The book of Hebrews begins this way. Long ago, at many times, and listen, and in many ways, God spoke to the fathers through the prophets. Long ago, at many times, and in many ways, God spoke to the prophets, or to the fathers through the prophets. Well, in the book of Isaiah, which occupies our attention through this season of Advent, and on into January, we're going to finish up that book, and then we'll move on with Jeremiah and the rest of the Bible. We'll work our way through the Bible. But in Isaiah, as you now know, we've done this now for 2 or 3 weeks of Advent. In the beginning of Isaiah, chapters 7 to 12, those 6 chapters. In those chapters, known to scholars as the Book of Emmanuel, you have 3 great messianic prophecies. There's the prophecy of the virgin who conceives and bears a son, whose name is Emmanuel, 7:14. There is the prophet of a child that is born to us, a son who is given to us, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And then there's the 3rd prophecy, not nearly as well known. You don't hear it at Christmas like as you do the other 2. It's in chapter 11 and verse 1 of Isaiah. It reads this way: There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse. Jesse, of course, is the father of King David. So a reference to the Messiah, of course. But likened, look at this, likened to a shoot, a sprig, a sucker that springs from a dead stump, or what appears to be a dead stump. So long ago, at many times, and in many ways, God spoke to the fathers through the prophets in many ways. Well, let me suggest to you that in this 3rd of the Messianic prophecies in the book of Emmanuel, God speaks to us in what I'm going to call a tale of 2 trees. What is this tale of 2 trees? Well, the first tree is the famous, what's the most famous tree in Lebanon, do you think?
Cedars.
Cedar, of course. Go Google it. Flag of Lebanon. I've been to Lebanon. The flag of Lebanon has a picture of the iconic cedar of Lebanon. Well, it's a cedar tree. It's part of the family of coniferous trees, not deciduous. But it doesn't look like a pine tree, and it doesn't look like cedar. It looks like a giant oak tree, and it's famous for its wood. It has wonderful aromatic wood, and wood that is exceptionally good for building. Whenever Solomon got ready to build the temple, mostly of stone, but there's a lot of wood in the temple, and Solomon could afford the best of everything. So where do you think he got his wood? Lebanon. The cedars of Lebanon. King Hiram in Tyre cut the timber, had it sawn into boards according to Solomon's order, and had it shipped to Jerusalem. Solomon could afford the finest wood in the world to build the temple, and he chose the cedar of Lebanon. Botanists, these are people who study plants, botanists refer to the cedar of Lebanon as the queen of trees. It's the greatest of all trees. Its magnificent size, its beauty, its usefulness. I mean, everything about the cedar of Lebanon is magnificent. As I said, I've been to Lebanon. I preached at a church just outside Beirut, and in the churchyard there were cedars. I'd never seen a cedar of Lebanon, but in the churchyard there were several of them, and I just kind of stood in awe. There it is, the queen of trees, the most beautiful of all trees, the most useful of all trees, the queen of trees. So in this tale of 2 trees, that's the first one. That's the first part of the tale, the cedar of Lebanon. And in the 10th chapter of Isaiah, I want you to turn there, in the 10th chapter of Isaiah, we're going to read about Assyria. In these days, the days of King Ahaz, after Uzziah and Jotham his son, and then comes Ahaz, and then Hezekiah. In these days, the greatest superpower in the world was Assyria, and they were belligerent. They were like Hitler in the Third Reich. They intended to conquer the world. We have evidence, for example, and there's probably reference to this in Isaiah chapter 9, but as far as we know, the Assyrians were the first army on earth in history to have uniforms for their soldiers. They were extremely well organized, well trained, cruel, and ambitious. They intended to conquer the world. Well, if you look at Assyria on a Bible map, you'll see that if this is James Breasted's famous Fertile Crescent, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers coming from this direction up toward Turkey, and then a bend right here, and then down the coast of the Mediterranean, all the way down to Egypt and the Nile. That's the Fertile Crescent. So Assyria is over here in the east, but they had their eyes set on Egypt over here. And so they make the loop, and they start making their way south, and they threaten Syria, and the northern kingdom of Israel, and of course, next would be the southern kingdom of Israel, Jerusalem and Judea, because that's the last roadblock before they get to Egypt. And Assyria intended to conquer the world. You got that picture in your mind? So Assyria is the great power. And here's what God says about Assyria. I want you to turn to the 10th chapter. And look at verse 5. Assyria. What does God say about Assyria? What is Assyria in God's eyes? Tell me, church. What does he say? Look at your Bible. What does he say? The rod of my anger. What does he mean by that? Well, what he means is that God is using Assyria to punish Israel. God is using it just like later on he used Babylon in exactly the same way. In fact, Habakkuk the prophet marvels of this, how God's eyes are too pure than to look on iniquity. So how can you possibly use a pagan, heathen nation like Babylon to judge your own people? But God does that. God is serious about sin, boys and girls. So before Babylon, Babylon's 100 years later. Before Babylon, there is Assyria, and God says, Assyria is my rod. I'm using it like a rod to spank a child. This great world empire, Assyria, the rod of my anger. But let's read on. Look down in verse 7. But he, that is Assyria, he does not so intend. In the mind, he's likening Assyria to a man. And he's saying, this man, Assyria, he doesn't think of himself as God's instrument. In his own mind, it's all about him. Okay? So where does the tree come in? Where does the cedar of Lebanon come in? Well, it comes in here that the pride and the arrogance of Assyria is likened to the beauty of a magnificent tree, namely the cedar of Lebanon. And we know that. I'm going to spend a lot of time on that. But we read over in, let's see, let me find my place here. Again, in chapter 10, we read that Assyria is a great forest, and at the very end of that chapter, he, that is God, will cut down the thickets of the forest with an axe. Earlier in the chapter, we're not going to take time for this, but earlier in the chapter, Assyria is likened to a great forest. Not just one cedar of Lebanon, but a whole forest of these magnificent trees. That's the way Assyria thinks of itself. What's God going to do with this forest? Well, first, he's going to reduce it in size so that even a child can number the number of trees there are that are left then, as a final act, he will cut down even the thickets of the forest with an axe, and Lebanon, that's the reference to the cedar of Lebanon, and Lebanon will fall by the majestic one. Let me summarize all this. Assyria is God's instrument, the rod of my anger. But Assyria does not think of itself that way. Assyria thinks of itself as a great world power, able to do whatever it chooses to do with impunity. Like a great forest. It just stands there magnificent and proud. And what does God say? I'm going to cut it all down. There won't be anything left but a stump. Okay, that's the first tree. Remember, it's a tale of two trees. That's the first tree. Now, but let me just pause right here before I go to the second tree. Let me pause right here to point out something. What Assyria thinks about itself is exactly what the world thinks. What is that? Well, the world thinks I'm in control of my life. I can do whatever I please. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. He can't even run his own life. I'll be blank if he'll run mine. Remember that old song from way back when? That's the way the world thinks. I wanted you to turn with me just for a moment to the book of James. I've been accused of using this line as a cop-out. Okay? But I just point out, it's not a cop-out. It's just what the Bible says. I'm not making this up. So, in the 4th chapter of James, the book of James, verse, what is that? 13? Come now, you who say, now he's imagining a businessman here. Type A personalities, hard-driving people. We have any type A's here in this congregation? Yeah, I thought so. I would beat you out. And we have some others too. But anyway, that's between you and your therapist. Okay, so James is addressing the type A personalities of his day. What does he say to them? Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. We're going to go make money. I've got a good friend who is an entrepreneur out in Texas. And I've helped him, in fact, in some of his entrepreneurial quests. Well, he just has that kind of Midas touch. He can think of a business and he'll do it and makes money. And then he'll go on to something else. And he's on to something else right now, but he talked to me about that. But anyway, so James is talking to people like that. But he has a warning, doesn't he? Look at verse 14. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, this is what you ought to say. If the Lord wills. It's, call it a habit if you want to, but whenever I say I'm going to do something or other, I'm going to do a visit, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, I always add, God willing. And I've had people say, you're just giving yourself wiggle room. You're just giving yourself an out. No, I'm not. What the Word says. Remember that your life is under God's control. It's not under your control. What exactly is it that you control in your life?
Attitude.
Really?
Somewhat.
Let's work on that.
Yeah, exactly.
No, think about this for a second. Are you guaranteed one more breath?
No.
The fact that you just took one doesn't guarantee you get another one. There's nothing in your life that's in control. I love seeing these little ones around our church, but I used to do marriage and family conferences or parenting conferences, and I would tell parents, when the child reaches about that 18-month to 24-month stage, they learn to walk and talk so they can say no and run away. Isn't that about right, parents? Yeah, we've been there. So when the child is an infant, you have more control than you want. But you very quickly learn that you're losing control very, very fast. And then they become teenagers, with all due respect to you guys. Something happens in their brain. I know when it happened to our daughter, I thought, who are you and what have you done with Melanie? Yeah. Anyway, the fact is, you know, we have a little control with our babies, but after that, it goes downhill really fast. And you don't have any control of anything in your life because you're not guaranteed one more breath. So to say, God willing, is just simply acknowledging that God is in control, I'm not. You see, Assyria thought that way on a grand scale, but everybody thinks that way. Everybody thinks that's the sinful human heart, to think that we're in control, but we're not. God is sovereign, and God alone. Oh, okay, that's one truth. What's the second truth? Well, just go with me back to the 6th chapter of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 6. And in Isaiah chapter 6, of course, we have the call of Isaiah. And so the Lord asked, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And Isaiah says, here am I, send me. Okay? And so God does send him. He tells him he's going to prophesy and preach and proclaim the word and so forth and so on, and judgment and all the rest that goes with his being a prophet. And so Isaiah asks a very natural kind of question. Well, how long am I to do this? That's in verse 11. Then I said, how long, O Lord? And God said, here's what God said. Until cities lie waste without inhabitants. In other words, Isaiah, the great prophet Isaiah, was going to preach himself to an empty congregation. We all love to see growth. But God told Isaiah, you're going to preach and everybody's going to desert. The whole of Judah is going to lie waste and desolate. And the Lord removes people far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. Now look at verse 13. And though a tenth remain in it, it will be burned again. The point here is that what is coming, the judgment that is coming on to Judah now, he's talking to Judah and Jerusalem, this is where the few remaining faithful people were. And he says Judah is going to be reduced to virtually nothing. It's going to be desolate. It's going to lie in waste. Then look at what he says. It will be burned again like a terebinth. This is a tree that grows in the desert in Israel. You can see them today. Or an oak whose stump remains. Now notice this. We have a stump in chapter 10. That was Assyria cut down. The cedars of Lebanon cut down. And now we have another stump. And this is Israel. This is Judah and Jerusalem. Look at what he says. Whose stump remains when it is felled. The holy seed is its stump. What is he talking about? Well, what he's talking about is that Judah is going to be reduced to almost nothing. There's going to be nothing left. And if we project further ahead, as he does in chapter 11, as we project further ahead, it's going to seem that all is lost. So that by the time we get to the birth of Jesus, what's left of the house of David? What's left of the kingship? David's gone, Solomon's gone, all the kings are gone. There's a king, but he's not even a Jew. It's Herod. He's not even a Jew. And the ruling power in Jerusalem and Judea is pagan Rome. That's the ruling power. So there is nothing left. I mean, for all intents and purposes, Israel is no more. It's just a stump. Okay, let me let you in on a little botanical secret. Okay? a cedar tree is cut down to the stump, like cedar bluff, if it's cut down to a stump, you know what happens to it? It rots. You cut an oak tree down to the stump, guess what happens? It sprouts. So here's the tale of two trees. God is going to take Assyria, cut it down to the stump, it's rot. It rots, it's gone. That's it. The pride is gone. That's what happens to all human pride. You know, I once read this. There are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who say to God, thy will be done. And there are people to whom God says, have it your way. So Assyria is God saying, have it your way, and what that means is, I'm going to cut you off, there'll be nothing left but a stump, and it's going to rot, and that's the end of Assyria. You know any Assyrians today? You know any Jews? Probably. Probably know some without knowing that you know them. So, two trees, both cut to a stump, one tree rots and it's gone. The other tree sprouts. And there shall go forth a shoot, a sprout from the stump of Jesse. And look, church, go to chapter 11, verse 1, and tell me what it says. There shall be this stump, this shoot from the stump of Jesse, and a branch from its roots will do what? It will bear fruit. Oh my goodness, what a promise from God. That at the lowest point, when all seems hopeless and lost and wrong, God intervenes and brings from a single little shoot that emerges from what appears to be a dead stump, and it grows into a great tree and bears much fruit all over the world. Wow. You know, I'm not going to preach the sermon now, of course, but on Wednesday night at our Christmas Eve service, I'm going to preach a little mini message entitled "The Child." Isn't it astonishing? You think this? Isn't it astonishing that all God's promises for the salvation of the world are wrapped up in what? A baby. Born of a peasant teenager in an obscure, out-of-the-way place in the earth. That's how God chose to bring salvation. When all appeared to be lost, God intervened. I want to tell you two quick stories and try to bring this to life into the real world. So the tale of two trees. The first tree is Assyria, proud and arrogant, doesn't realize that it's under God's control, that it's doing what God wants it to do and nothing else. Proud, arrogant, but God cuts down all the trees of the forest. There's nothing left but a stump and lots. And there's the other tree, an oak or a terebinth, that is also cut to a stump, so that hundreds of years later, there is a carpenter who is in the line of King David, but is no king. He's a carpenter. And Mary is also of the line of King David, a peasant teenager. That's all that's left of the line of David. And a baby's cry was heard in Bethlehem. God changes the world. Okay? So God, when all hope is gone, God steps in. That's the message. When all hope is gone, when there is no hope, God is our hope. He can take what is broken, like that cup, that we could never put that together. He can take it and make it brand new. That's what God does. Two quick stories. Both true, both in my own experience. When I was president, I may have told you this one before, when I was president of Frisbee College, 75% of what I did was raise money. I was just raising money all the time, talking to people, raising money. We had to raise $250,000 every month just to pay the bills. Summertime, dry time. You don't have tuition, you don't have money coming in, people don't give in the summertime. So, we're just clinging to hope that we can make it until September and the tuition comes in. Okay? That's kind of the way you live when you're So, this is like July or first part of August, and we, I literally don't know where the next payroll is coming from. I literally don't. And I'm the president of the school. We gotta do this. We have to find a way. And I don't have it in my pocket. I get it. So, I had 4 vice presidents. Well, 3 vice presidents and a senior vice president. And I said, man, let's come together. Come to my office. Let's pray. We got down our knees and we started praying. We told God how much we needed. We need $150,000 or we're not going to be able to pay the bills. Pure and simple. We need $150,000. I've asked everybody I know, and no help. So we pray. It's just a stump. That's all that's there. It's a stump. A day or so after that prayer meeting, my assistant comes into the office shaking. She's as white as a sheet. I just saw her back when I was in Texas, back in Thanksgiving. I saw her. Had dinner with her and her husband. And I reminded her of this. Yeah, she came into my office with an envelope and she was shaking and white as a sheet. She said, Dr. Wells, I think you want to see this. So she hands me the envelope. I open it up. Inside is a check from somebody I'd never heard of. I knew nothing about this person. It was a woman. $150,000. That was the check. I went to see the woman. Caroline went to see her. She lived in an unair-conditioned house in Dallas. Can you imagine? Wow. But she bought and sold property. She had some properties, and she had sold the house, made $150,000, and for some reason the Lord just prompted her to send it to Bristol College. You can't make this stuff up. When there's nothing but a stump, God brings forth the shoot. Bears fruit. Another true story, also true story. And when I went to be pastor in Waco, Texas, I went to do my work there. Not even probably a month, maybe a month and a half after I went there to be pastor. One morning, we lived at a pastoral right next to the church, just like here. And so, knock at the door. Chairman of my deacons, who was also the chairman of the church committee that brought me to this little church out in the country. His heart is broken. He just found out that his wife was having an affair with a man who works for him in his company. In marriage counseling, you call this stage 4. This is headed for divorce court. No doubt about it. No hope. In the counseling world, this is beyond hope. I go to see the woman, she's as hard as a stone. Her face is like flint. She is unrepentant, she is unremorseful. I think she's doing it to get at him, but anyway, I won't belabor that. But she was unmovable. So I talked to my deacon, and we just prayed. God, if you don't do something, this is over. These 2 boys, they're 2 boys, are going to be in a separated home. And some of you have been there, you know what I'm talking about. You know this pain. So we just prayed. How do you know how it happened? But by the grace of God and the power of God, that dead stump comes to life. And they reconciled. And renewed their marriage vows. And stayed happily married until he died. Thanks be to God. That's what God does. That's what God does. The tale of 2 truths. Let's stand.